Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay. Right, thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Borough Council's Audit and Governance Committee. My name is Councillor Anne Burns and I'm Chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. It's important that all participants conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. Please put your mobile phones on silent. Participants must ensure their microphones are muted throughout the meeting. If you wish to speak, you must raise your hand via the raised hand facility in Zoom and only unmute your microphone when invited to speak. Please do not interrupt other speakers. Members are reminded that they should not have alternative communication lines open, i.e. that's Skype or chat. If members do lose connections to the meeting, we will adjourn for up to 10 minutes to assist them in reconnecting. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being broadcast live to the internet. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. To vote on matters, I will ask the Democratic Services officers to manage this process for us. And at this point, members will be requested to unmute their microphones. After a brief pause. A move to the seconder will be requested and a roll call of members will be undertaken. Please reply with I vote for, against, abstain, then remute your microphones. That's the formalities over, members. Let's proceed with today's business. So the first item on today's agenda is apologies for absence.
Thanks, Chair. I'll do a roll call. Councillor Burns.
Sorry.
Councillor Burns, present.
Present.
Councillor Aswad.
Present.
Councillor Ronson.
Present.
Councillor Shirley.
Present.
Councillor M.A. Thompson.
Present.
Councillor Callister is joining us but is going to be late. And officers, Susan Roberts, Director of Resources.
Present.
Debbie Starr, Head of Legal and Governance and Monitoring Officer. Present. Jane Holden, Principal Legal Officer.
Present.
Keith Jackson, Head of Internal Audit.
Present.
John Penfold, Corporate Support Manager.
Present.
Brooke Parsons, Corporate Support Officer.
Present.
And Gareth Kelly from Grant Thornton, External Audit.
Present.
And Chris Whittingham is not joining us today, Gareth, is that right?
That is correct, Sharon.
That's everybody, thanks, Anne.
Thank you. I messed that up at the start of it, didn't I? But we can carry on now. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. And as you said, Councillor Callister will be joining us. And is there any further apologies? We haven't had any. So agenda item 2 are urgent items. To note any items which the Chair considers to be of an urgent nature. And I don't think we have any items that sort of related to it. Agenda item 3, delegations. To receive notice from members who may wish to move any delegated matter non-delegated and which will be decided by a majority of members present and voting at the meeting. Are there any matters members would like to raise? No, thank you. Admissions of press and public. To consider whether the press and public should be excluded from the meeting during considerations of any item on the agenda. And I don't think there are any items that we want to exclude today. Thank you. Declarations of interest. To receive declarations by members and or co-optees of interest in respect of any agenda items on today's agenda.
Councillor Shirley, Chair.
Chair, right, Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Agenda item 10, wish to declare that I am a trustee of the Dalton Community Association.
Thank you, Councillor Shirley. Agenda item 6, the confirmation of the minutes held on the 30th of July 2020. And I think these have already been through full council, but if we can go through them, if there are any items that members want to raise, then please do so. So any items on that agenda? Other than that, do members agree that the minutes are a correct record of the meeting and agree those minutes?
Agreed, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And agenda item 7, public participation. Any members of the public who wishes to speak or ask any questions to make representation or petitions at this meeting should apply to do so, but there are no questions or representations that have been made to this meeting today. So agenda item 8, which is now for decisions for this meeting, and we work forward on the work plan, and I will ask Sue Roberts, our Director of Resources, to speak to that paper. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the work plan for the Audit and Governance Committee that's presented at each meeting to give members sight of the business that will be considered throughout the year. It has previously been a rolling plan, but what we've done now is create it for this financial year, this year of meetings, and we'll review the next year's each March. So we've got the plan for the year ahead, just because some things vary in terms of which meeting they'll come to each year, and this year's been a little bit peculiar, so some of the items appeared twice. What we've done is bring in the standards items that were not necessarily part of the work plan in any detail previously. So the plan attached to Appendix 1 is much more detailed in the regulatory kind of aspects. Some of the items are exactly the same, so we've carried over the normal business we would see to do with the accounts and internal audit work and the risk work and so on. The plan will still be presented at each meeting because it does provide that meeting by meeting agenda, and in this report now I want to mention each time if there's anything scheduled to be on the agenda but isn't, and the reason why. So we haven't got a restricted assurance monitoring report because there are no reports to report against, so there's nothing to pick up and report. So that is marked as an every time and every meeting report for the agenda, but if there is no business to report then the item just won't appear. So I just wanted to explain why that's not in the pack. And also the item that would be an update from our appointed auditors is going to be a verbal update today rather than a published report on the agenda. So the item is still there, but it's just slightly different this time. There are some highlighted items on the appendix, but I would like to mention there's an annual report right at the bottom of the list, an annual report from the chair that's been added onto the agenda for this committee, and that's for the chair to summarise the work of the committee for the year, and that report will be presented at full council. It will come to this committee first, but it's kind of a reflection of what's been achieved by the Audit and Governance Committee as a whole. We've got the agenda, the work plan to review when we get to the end of the year, and we do an effectiveness review of the operation of the committee, but this is more a report of the business that's been considered and agreed upon, decided upon by the committee for the year. So it's like an annual report, but just for audit and governance. So besides those changes and bringing in those new items, it is a work plan that members have seen before, and it will be presented each time. It just is a bit of an overhaul this time rather than a little tweak here and there. It's quite different. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sir Roberts. And can I just say that, there's a lot of work gone into doing that annual report down. So we've got the schedule of when reports are going to come to this meeting. I think it's really worthwhile us doing that. And so I'm just saying, members, does any member want to ask any questions? Councillor Shirley, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mrs. Roberts, thank you very much for this report. It's really comprehensive as always. And my only concern, Madam Chair, is that our staff have got all of the resources that they need. We understand how challenged they are at the moment. Aside from this pandemic, there's lots of tasks to action throughout this work plan. And my question is, Madam Chairman, does the Director of Resources, is she confident that the staff are sharing the workload equally so that they get an appropriate work-life balance? In other words, I don't want colleagues to be going home fretting about these things.
Mrs. Roberts.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, this work plan is a reflection of the work that officers are performing as part of compliance, work, and what is work that we would do in any case. This presentation to committee of certain elements of what we do is for assurance to this committee, as those charged with governance, that those arrangements are in place. There's much more, unfortunately, that we do on top of this, which I understand your comment. You appreciate the workload that we've all got, but these matters on this work plan are essential to give you that assurance to be able to sign off the annual governance statement, the statement of accounts. So it isn't everything that we do, and yeah, you're right, it is a lot of work, but it is necessary to give members that assurance so that we can, demonstrate that compliance for you and to ourselves as professionals. But the plan is developed not just by me, with other officers, so we do share that out, but I don't know what to say. It is a lot of work, but it is required and it is necessary. But I appreciate that that you recognise that it is a lot of work for us to do, so thank you. But yes, we will achieve the work plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. And can I just say, I think we all recognise the very difficult task that's had to happen, especially with the finance department. I mean, we need to make sure that our finances are being run competently, and I know they are. And we've got some excellent officers that are keeping us on track with that. So I think our thanks go to members of the staff for the work that they've been doing over this very difficult period of time. So thank you for that, Mrs. Roberts. Now, the recommendation is to note that report. Members quite happy to note the report. Thank you. And so agenda item 9 is internal audit final reports. And the head of internal audit, Keith, would you like to present the report, please?
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's just the one report for this particular meeting. It's finalising the payroll report from the 2019-20 year. Pleased to say that substantial assurance, Chair. There were 3 recommendations. The one important recommendation just related to ensuring that accommodation is booked in accordance with council policy. We just identified one in a peculiar instance in audit testing. The other 2 recommendations are just compliance matters, Chair, just really reaffirming the controls that need to be put in place. Don't have anything further to say, Chair, but I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions from members on the internal audit report? No. And Keith, is that all on that report? Yeah. Members are recommended to note the report of internal audit findings. Members happy to note the report? Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the internal audit progress report. Is that you, Keith?
Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you. Okay, I'll just go through fairly quickly, Chair. This is obviously from the period April to October 2020. It's slightly different to the usual content, but I'll come to that particular additional paragraph shortly. Page 4, Chair, of the report, when we've got the statistical summary recommendations, clearly this is just the payroll report, which I've covered, and we have the three agreed recommendations. So we don't have any priority 1 recommendations or any rejected recommendations. Moving on to page 7 of the report, we've got a summary of the progress really against the plan. I think it obviously comes as no surprise that there's little progress against the listed audits, and we identified in the plan that there was a reduction in resource, and there was a number of these areas we probably wouldn't be covering within the financial year. We'd have to stretch it beyond the current year. Over on to page 8, Chair, the bottom half of the page, I think, obviously highlights the work that we have undertaken in place of the expected reviews due to the unprecedented circumstances. The coverage there clearly shows the volume of work that we've undertaken, and this is really just concluded as far as audit are concerned this week, Chair, with the final grant payment file being produced. So the only other area really is on page 10, where I've summarised the contract audit reviews that we will hope to conclude within the current financial year. page 12 lists the other 3 reports that we finalised from the 2019-20 plan. We're just waiting for responses to these, Chair. I think under the current circumstances, it's maybe to be expected that we've got slight delays really in terms of these responses, but we will chase these and hopefully finalise in the next committee meeting. Don't have any further comments to make, Chair. I'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Members have any questions on that internal audit progress report? If
Councillor
not,
Shirley, Chair.
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Jackson, thank you for this report. I think a lot of credit needs to go to staff again, and this was something that came out of Council on Tuesday's members' collective thanks. Audit were one of the teams that were seconded across to administer grants and did so flexibly and as efficiently as possible. Just want to ask about page 12, indicator 2. Are we managing expectations of our customers or partners who might be waiting a response? One would hope that people understand the situation, but it's quite a lot of pressure there. Responses within 20 working days at 0%. How are we dealing with that pressure given the current pandemic?
I think really through you, Chair, there'll be very few reports issued based on the progress that I highlighted earlier in the plan. There's just the 3 additional reports on page 12 to finalise. There aren't a great number of recommendations within those reports, so the actual impact in terms of responding will be minimal. Beyond those reports, I wouldn't expect we'll be really applying any pressure, because there's probably not going to be many more reports produced within this current financial year. So I think I do probably need to leave that as an indicator, because it's an agreed indicator for this committee, but I wouldn't really take any further concern beyond that.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Are members happy to note that report? Can I just say, Keith, thank you for the work that you do too, because it's really important that we have that backup, and internal audit is part and parcel of that. So I know that the teams, all the finances teams during this really, really strange time have been working extra hard. So thank you very much for that work you do. Members happy to move.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Members happy to move on?
Councillor Burns, you've muted.
I'm just moving agenda item 11, the Ombudsman report, and I'm thinking that's Mrs. Starr is going to be speaking to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This brings the committee the Ombudsman's annual review letter for 2019-20, which is attached as an appendix to the report. You'll note that during this reporting period, the Ombudsman made a decision in just one case, which compares similarly to last year. Just one case was upheld, and it was a planning matter where there was avoidable delay and unclear communication, but the remedy actions, which included an apology and other actions the council was to take to progress the matter, being complied with. As I say, it's the annual review letter. It's reported annually to the committee, so it's to note. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Starr. Members, any questions for her? Would you like to note that report from the Ombudsman, the annual report? Is that okay? Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 12, which is the compliments and complaints. Is this Mrs. Starr as well?
It is, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the first time I think the committee may have received a report around the complaints. These are the council's complaints, internal complaints, and we thought it may be appropriate to bring to this committee to note the council has got a 2-stage complaints process. Stage 1 is dealt with usually by the service manager with an appeal to either a director or assistant director, depending on the nature of the complaint, and it's only if those people are dissatisfied that they will then go on to the local government ombudsmans. So clearly feedback is very important to the council, and as well as looking at the complaints, we've looked at the compliments that have been received. They haven't been recorded centrally, but moving forward, we're proposing that we log all compliments centrally as well as complaints that come into us. You'll note that the Dock Museum, by way of an example, receives a number of compliments through his visitor comments. In terms of complaints, during this last year, there was 52 stage 1 complaints, down slightly on the previous year. There's no underlying trends shown in the complaints that are received, and the number of complaints that went to a stage 2 appeal are much reduced. The appendices show a little bit more breakdown of the statistical evidence there. And I think for you, a question maybe for members is this the information you'd like to see on a regular basis? Is it in a format you like? And really just to seek any feedback on it, really, but to note what the contents.
Thank you, Mrs. Starr. I certainly think it's a well worthwhile paper fetching here to Audit and Governance Committee for us to see that not only are members out there of the public complaining, but they're also making compliments about the service as well. So it's really important that we get that feedback, and I think it's in a good format for us to easily understand. So I'm quite happy with that. I hope members of the committee are happy to receive this report in the format it is, and I think it's something worthwhile that we really do want to see here. Yeah, I'm not getting anybody saying anything other than that. So the members agree that we know this report and it's something we'd like to see back again when we have this meeting. So thank you, Mrs. Starr. Yes. Okay, right. Agenda item 13, which is best practice regulations. That Mrs. Starr is.
So yes, it is me again. Sorry, Chair. The Standards in Public Life produced a report in 2019. This committee is very well aware of that report because I've taken previous reports to you to update. This week, in fact, I think today, we've had a letter in from the chair of the committee asking for feedback in terms of what local authorities are doing with regards to the best practice recommendations that they made through their report. In terms of the recommendations, they had some recommendations that were for government in terms of changes to legislation, but then they had some general recommendations to local authorities in terms of what they may do in terms of raising ethical standards and reviewing processes. So the appendix to this report sets out their best practice recommendations in the left-hand column, and then there's a comment in terms of where we feel we are in progressing on those recommendations, which we will be feeding back to Committee of Standards in Public Life. So it's just to bring this to your attention, to update you in terms of progress against those best practice recommendations, and to seek, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anybody, any questions? Can I just ask you, does this go to the Executive Committee, Mrs. Starr, or is it just for us?
It's just for you.
It's just for us to note the guidance in the columns in the paper.
Yeah.
Members happy to receive that report and note the details that are there? Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 14, which is the recruitment of the independent person. Is that Mrs. Starr, please?
It is, thank you. Members will recall that at full council earlier in the week, they approved the appointment of Stephen Murray as independent person for a further 12 months. The second independent person has stepped down for the role. And again, the Standards for Public Life have put forward some recommendations around independent persons. But there are requirements in terms of recruitment to that role, and therefore it's felt appropriate that the council goes out to seek recruitment. The question is whether we go and see whether we are able to recruit one or two independent persons, and also there is conversation around the term of office of that independent persons. Currently, we've been appointing them for a 4-year term. The standards report from Public Life are suggesting it should be a 2-year term renewable with 2 years, but that's completely discretionary at the moment, and then there are no rules or requirements around that. Within this report, since it's a while since we've recruited 2 independent persons, I'm proposing a course of action where we would go out to advert, and we are required by the legislation to follow various criteria to recruit that person. So it's an open and transparent process. And what we're proposing is, if members are comfortable, that we go out to advert, we seek applications, we review those applications, and if appropriate, that maybe we have an interview panel consisting of myself and 3 members of the audit committee, which would include yourself, Chair, and an opposition member, as well as another person, to be part of an interview panel with a view to making any recommendations to full council if members were comfortable with that approach.
Thank you, Mrs. Starr. Can I just add to that? I think it's, if we are going to have independent people, which I think is good practice, then I do think we need to have an open and transparent way of recruiting those. So I do think we should go out to advert for that. And I'm thinking that I'd like to agree with the recommendation for a 2-year term of office with a proviso that we add another 2 year if that's okay with members on this committee. So with that, I mean, members, have you got anything to add to that? Would anybody like to say anything? Mrs. Thompson? Mr. Shirley? Councillor Shirley?
Thank you, Chair. Did the Leader of the Council want to come in, Chair, or no? All right, thank you. I agree with you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that what we were voting on, if I may, I'm sorry to be pedantic, page 87.3.11, fifth bullet says that the appointments to be for 4 years. So I just wanted to clarify, are we voting for 2 with the option of an extension, or are we voting for 4, Madam Chair?
My recommendation as Chair, and I'll move that, is we vote for 2 and then we make it another 2 if that's necessary. But I think we want to abide by the good practice that's come forward from the committee, that and agree with the head of legal services that we go for the 2 and then +2 if that's the way forward for the future. I do think it's necessary to do that. I mean, I think working together with people, you've got to have a feel for that happening. So I think 1 year is too short. I think 2 years is about right. And then if they're fitting in well and they're doing the work properly, we can add another 2 years after that. I think that's the best way forward. So I'm moving that. Mrs. Thompson seconded it. Is are members happy with that? And that we do go out to advert, and if we hopefully get a number of people applying for this, we have a interview process and we actually can choose the person going forward. So
can we do a roll call on that, please?
Yes, please.
We've got moved by Councillor Burns and seconded by Councillor Thompson. So can just sit for, against or abstain. Councillor Burns?
For.
Councillor Aswad?
For.
Councillor Ronson?
For.
Councillor Shirley?
For.
And Councillor Emma Thompson?
For.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's okay. Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 15 is the Code of Conduct and Social Media Report. And this is Mrs. Starr.
Yes, it's actually social media guidance, Chair. The council approved a revised code of conduct at its meeting earlier in the week. What I've brought forward is some revised guidance on the code itself, and also some revised social media guidance to support the social media policy. I appreciate there's still more work to be done around members and training and support, but this is a piece of the jigsaw that I'm hoping that members will be happy to endorse. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Starr. Has any member any comments or questions for her, or do you happy to move the recommendations that we agree that there is some further work to be done, but this is the bones of the code of conduct that we want to put in place? I'm not getting anybody having any word against that. So quite happy to move forward with that, members.
Can we have a mover and seconder, please, Chair?
Can we have a mover, please, for that?
I'll move it.
Oh,
Councillor Starr moved it. Councillor Shirley, seconding.
Yeah.
So can I just do a roll call on that, please? So Councillor Burns, for, against or abstain?
For.
Councillor Aswad?
For.
Councillor Ronson?
For.
Councillor Shirley?
For.
And Councillor Thompson?
Support.
Thank you.
Thank you. So agenda item 16 is the Gifts and Hospitality Register. Is this Debbie or is it John?
No, hopefully the final one from me, Chair. Again, this is not something that's previously been reported to committee, but we thought if you're happy, we'll bring it into your annual work programme. This is a report just to give you an overview, a review of the employee gifts and hospitality. I think at some point in the future, a separate report will come on to review the register of interest for members, but this is around officers, and all officers have been asked to confirm that the registers of interest have been up to date. There's been no significant gifts or hospitality received in the last 12 months. In fact, there were only 3 additions to the register. One was a bouquet of flowers for good service provided. A couple were for dinner and lunch as part of their corporate roles. So, as I say, there was nothing significant to report, but it's just to give you the assurance that the registers are being reviewed and kept up to date.
Thank you. The recommendation is to note this report, members. Are you happy to note this report? Somebody out there will speak. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so agenda item 17 is the risk register, and that must be John Penfold. Yes?
It is.
Thank you.
So the risk register goes to management team on a quarterly basis, as it says in the Council's risk policy. I took it to management team in September, and there's been quite a few changes. So if you look at the register, the ones that are highlighted in red are changes that were made in September. It's probably worth noting at this point that during the lockdown, we had to examine risks and assess them without going through the formal process of bringing it to members, because things needed to be done on such short basis. So we have sort of managed risks throughout the lockdown period. So if you look at the existing controls mitigations, the ones in red, we've now introduced service planning, which is going to improve our response to changes by central government. We're also taking on external support to help us deal with some of the things that are coming up. And the example I've given of that is RAP is going to look at our waste collection service and come up with recommendations for how we might want to deliver that service in the future. So as I say, all the changes are in red. So if members have got any questions.
Thank you, John. Members got any questions on the at-risk register?
Councillor Shirley, please, Chair.
Councillor Shirley.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Comment more than a question. Thanks, John, to you for this in challenging circumstances. Really good report, and thank you for everything that you're doing and continue to do during this difficult time, John.
Thank you.
Can I just ask John, I mean, going forward with this risk register, it looks like we could be on another course for further lockdown. Have you done this risk register over the long term, or is it done, you know, because we've been 6 months out of the office and everything else now? Do we need to add anything further if we're going into further issues to do with members of staff not being back in the office and working from home? Do we have to put anything else into operation for that happening?
Not at the moment. I think it's safe to say that we're probably in a stronger position now than we were in March, because we've been through the first phase. We're probably now entering the second phase. Staff now have the capability for working from home in terms of IT equipment. We've got processes in place to manage their well-being while they're working from home. After some initial problems, Zoom's working really well, as you can see by this meeting. So yeah, I think we're in a stronger position now, but obviously if things that we're not expecting come up, we will need to assess them and put mitigating actions in place.
Thank you for that, John. It was about people working at home, being in isolation and actually making sure that they're connected to the centre, and if they do have issues about working from home, and Dawn, you know, we were able to pick that up. And I think what you're saying, we are.
Well, managers are in regular contact with their staff to make sure that there aren't any wellbeing issues and that they don't feel isolated.
Right, thank you, John. Any further comments or issues?
Councillor Shirley again, please, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, I meant to ask you, reminded me, thank you. Just on the subject of kit, John, and IT equipment for colleagues, one thing that I wondered is, are staff able to pick up the phone from home? So do we have voice over the internet phones or call diversion or anything like that? Because if not, it would concern me if staff felt compelled to use their own personal phone.
An increasing number of staff have got mobile phones that the council provide. We've also got something called teleworker, so that their desk phones can be diverted to the teleworker phone at their home, and all they need to do with that is plug it into an electric socket. And we are looking at new systems so that we do have voice over internet protocols, but we are looking at a system whereby all staff will be able to talk to their iPads as I am now.
Thank you, John. Members quite happy to note that report. Thank you very much. And agenda item 18 is the draft governance statement. And this is John too.
It is, yeah. So this is the draft one. And the reason I brought it to this committee meeting is to give members an opportunity to read through it. And if they wanted any adjustments to it, you can let me know. And then when it comes to the final version comes in November, we can make sure that those adjustments are in there. So looking through the changes from last year, if you look at the bottom of page 2, and there's a couple of, I think, really important additions. So the council's rolling out its values and behaviours to all staff and members during 2020-21. So the council plan will tell us this is what we're aiming for. Council's service plans will show how each department and members of staff are contributing to delivering what we're trying to deliver. And the important thing about the values and behaviours are the behaviours that we expect from staff to make sure that this goes smoothly. And comments I've had back from values and behaviours so far have been really, really positive. Staff think it's a really good idea. The council's recently appointed a new post of Head of Legal and Governance. In terms of consultation, there's significant consultation going on at the moment around the Future High Street Fund and the Town Deal Board, and we've also got a Major Projects Board. And the council's also engaged a social media and public relation provider to positively project Borough Council brand. We move on to page 3, section C. Obviously, we published the council plan earlier this year. We're developing service plans, as I've said. We've submitted business case for High Street Fund, a town deal, and we've already received Heritage Lottery funding for the Dock Museum and Heritage Grant to improve Duke Street. So all that is looking really, really positive. And hopefully we will be successful with Future High Street and Towns deal. And then finally, if we move on to top of page 5, this document has been reviewed by the new management team and others. And you know, there's some new posts in there, Director of People and Place, and as I've already mentioned, Head of Legal and Governance. And I think the strengthening of the management team will support us in going forward. Any questions?
Thank you, John. I think it's a really good document. It really is saying like it is at the moment. And, you know, we've got all those news posts in and we know that lots of things happening in the town. So we needed this document now to actually put the anchor of where we want to be. So I would like to say it's a good document. If any members want to add any comments or change anything in the document, we're quite happy to agree that it goes forward. It will come back to us when it's only in draft at the moment. When it's in proper format, it will come back to us and then on to full council, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Agreed. Right, agenda item 19 is the update from the external audit. Gareth.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as normally we would have a written report, but as we presented the last update report in July, there isn't any new reports that we needed to bring to your attention on the sector updates. That said, since we've in recent weeks, there has been the outcome of the Redmond review. So, Chair, I was going to spend a couple of moments just sharing some of the headlines from that with you as those charged with governance, and also to give you a quick update on the audit progress. So if I start with the audit progress, first of all, yes, we received the accounts at the end of August alongside the narrative report and the annual governance statement that John's just presented under item 18. So the audit has commenced. It is the full audit team is in from next week, so we will be virtually on site for between now and the end of November. It is proven to be very challenging to do the audit 100% remotely, as I'm sure you as those charged with governance will appreciate. But we're working very closely with Sue and the finance team to make the best use of technology, including Microsoft Teams, etc., to make that happen. But I do think it's important to highlight to the committee at this stage that we're doing everything we can to sign off by the end of November, but it is a stiff ask, and that's something that we are striving to achieve, but it is challenging. The other side of our responsibilities, as you know, is to give you an assessment on value for money arrangements, and that work has commenced as well. And I know Chris has got meetings set up with Sue and Stephanie, respectively, to look at financial sustainability and procurement and contract management. Now, on the latter, on procurement and contract management, the committee will be aware that this was an area where we did provide an except for qualification in 1819. So that work, there's a significant amount of work to be completed on that. But again, Chris is meeting with Stephanie, but also with Keith as well in internal audit to reflect on the progress made on those reports in and around contracts and procurement. So it's still very much a live issue. And in terms of whether that will progress to lifting the except for at this stage, we don't think it will, but it's the work is still not complete. And it is still subject to a national moderation panel within Grant Thornton. So all VFM conclusions where there's been a prior except for or a except for that's obviously in year, it has to go through a national moderation panel of partners and people from our central technical team to make sure that we are being fair and you know, in effect moderate that final assessment. So that is also in hand to happen before the end of November. So as I mentioned, there's no wider sector update reports to share with you, but we have had in the last few weeks the Redmond review that has come out now. Some of you may have already seen that, but if you're okay, Chair, I will just spend a few minutes going through it because it is quite important and does present some fundamental changes to both audit and reporting as well from the council's side in terms of suggested reforms. So if you're okay, Chair, I'll give it some headline messaging, and I've also got a slide deck which I can share. I have shared actually with Sue and Sharon, that can be distributed to members after the meeting. But in terms of the Redmond review, the review led by Sir Tony Redmond reported a few weeks back, and if you recall, its overall theme was to look at greater accountability and improved transparency in and around financial reporting. So everything that has been reported on is anchored in that area. The other thing to come out of the review is that reform is urgent, that it needs immediate action and response. Obviously, it's not going to impact on 1920, but key stakeholders, including the NEO and MHCLG, are both engaged in this review, and there is encouragement for use of voluntary undertakings in advance of some legislative reform that may be required. So again, it's important to say at this stage, this is just a review and the recommendations. They haven't been enforced yet, but you know, there is a certain amount of weight behind them, and a need for urgency, I think, is important. So in broad terms, the reforms can be split into 3 areas. It's a reform of audit providers, so your external audit providers, reform to council arrangements, and then reform to the regime that moderates all audit activities, and the sort of both the commissioning of external audit services and the oversight from a quality perspective. So taking each of those in turn, just some of the very high level headline messages: that currently audit is felt to be underpriced by on average 25%, and this is something that Redmond feels is very serious indeed and needs addressing, because there has been a serious drain on the specialisms within external audit, and that's something that needs to be addressed and redressed. The proposal is for the local government reporting timeline to move back to September. If you recall, a few years ago, we were on a September deadline, and it got pulled forward to the 31st of July. So that's a good thing. I think officers would welcome that, because you get a bit extra time to produce the accounts, and audit will have a bit of additional time to complete the audit as well. Need for local authorities want firms to have better capacity and properly trained and experienced people to deliver the audits, which is a fair challenge. And audit providers will also be subject to sanctions going forward if these are legislated, which is interesting, because I think what they're saying here is that if the council's heading for financial meltdown, for example, has the auditor flagged that on a timely basis as part of their responsibilities, particularly on their value for money side of work. In terms of the second area, reforms to council arrangements, there's a proposal that the auditor addresses full council each year as well, to avoid any sort of dilution of messages. So again, that's going over and beyond what we would normally do in terms of you know, our main liaisons being with yourselves as those charged with governance on behalf of the council. The need for accounting arrangements to improve, and that there's annual formal meeting between the 3 statutory officers and your appointed auditor as well, to emphasise the importance of audit. And for audit committees to appoint independent members as well. So that's something that again is a proposal in the review. And then reforms to the regime in overall terms. There's a sort of a strong view that there's a need for the accountability, the oversight and the regulation to come under one body. And there is a proposal for an office for local audit and regulation to be put in place. Now, I think it's important to emphasise this is not a return to the Audit Commission days. This is a much smaller entity, something on the scale of £5 million, which is still a lot of money. But if you think from a national perspective, that would have only been about 5% of what the Audit Commission was in terms of budget. So a much smaller but more tight focused entity that would oversee public local audit. And there would also be a requirement for a stakeholder committee as well, with all key stakeholders involved. And then the other thing that I should have maybe mentioned under the changes for councils is there's proposals that there should maybe be summary accounts and refinement of SITFA's accounting code as well. So I thought, Chair, I know that's a bit of a quick rattle through, but I thought it was important just to highlight that to the committee as those charged of governance. But again, I'm very happy to, in future committees, as things emerge and things start to get either legislated or crystallised following this review, happy to work with officers and to provide additional training or raising awareness on what the impacts will be. So at that point, Chair, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gareth. That Redmond review has been called for by government, has it?
Yes.
So where does it go from putting out these proposals? What happens to it from here? Because it seems to me there's some quite meaty proposals in there for local government. In fact, you know, I mean, I know they're saying that it's underfunded and it's going to cost us another 25% more, could be. So is there any suggestion of where that funding's going to come from, especially in terms of local government finances? We don't have money to play around with anymore. And, you know, I welcome the fact that they're putting the proposal back to September, because it was always, you know, I mean, we managed to do it, but it put a lot of people under a lot of pressure getting those reports done earlier than that. And I'm glad they've seen sense in that and putting it back. But there just seems to be some meaty proposals here that is going to have a knock-on effect for us as a small authority.
Yeah.
And I think if you've given them proposals to Sue, perhaps we need to have a little training session with Sue, what it may mean to us, and not trying to put work on you, but maybe the members training board need to have a look at this, because it is going to be a big issue for us as a local authority.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chair. I couldn't agree more with you. And there is a lot in here, and it's not to say that all of this is going to be implemented, because again, these are the recommendations out of the review. But I will say that there is an urgent need for reform, and it is something that, you know, has got our full support and other audit providers in the market as well, and the other key stakeholders, SITFA, LGA, etc. And I think, you know, so and like you, I do welcome some of the deadlines being pushed back, which is a helpful thing. But, you know, introducing summary accounts is an additional burden. Costs, absolutely, that needs to be funded. I think that's a fair comment. But maybe the plus side will come. There'll be some trade-offs with, you know, extended deadlines that may help a little bit, but also with a simplified code of financial reporting as well, that may help. You know, that we move to a more simpler set of financial statements that users can get their heads around a lot easier than what's currently in place. So there are some meaty proposals on here, absolutely, but, you know, there's a lot of positives that could come out of it as well as a result. But just to answer your first part of that question, the NAO and MHCLG have had direct representation on the review as well, and are taking immediate action off the back of it. So there is a bit of momentum behind it. It's not seen as a review that's just gonna, there's a review and nothing happened.
No.
It has got a weight and momentum, and some key stakeholders involved in it, and quite senior people from NAO and MHCLG are already taking some of the matters forward, being supported by all the other key stakeholders as well.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you for raising that. And I think we'll have a talk to Sue and Debbie about what we do with this, and you know, if you've given slides to Sue, she can have a look through them and see what it's going to mean for us and what we need to actually talk about in the future. Anybody else want to raise anything with Gareth while he's here? If not, I'll say thank you to him for his update and look forward to him coming back to the next meeting, perhaps with a report or when you do come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody want to raise anything? Other than that, I think we come to the end of the agenda. Thank you for your attendance, members. If you can just stay there until we finish the live stream. Thanks. Thanks, Sharon.